everybody, welcome back to Kitchen Witchin', coming to you from the ugliest kitchen in America. I'm your host, Susie Bianco. Thanks for coming along with me today. Now, we have an interesting treat. We're making chili today. Now, chili actually has quite a long history. The history I have dug up suggests that about the 1700s, several families emigrated to northern Mexico from the Canary Islands. Now, they emigrated to what would eventually be known as San Antonio, or it may have been known as San Antonio at that point, but it was just part of Mexico and more of a missionary outreach outpost, maybe, with some soldiers and some Catholics. And these families, research suggests, learned this technique of slow stewing beef with tomatoes, which are actually native to the area, and chili peppers, and that's chili with an E, of course, from the indigenous folks that lived there, the native tribes that lived nearby. And this technique pretty much remained unchanged until the 1880s, when now suddenly San Antonio finds itself a hub in a new state of Texas, in a new country in the United States. And many soldiers, mostly white soldiers, are coming to the city and being invited into the homes of local families, and this is something that they would have been served commonly, which is kind of how it got out, because people brought these ideas back home to different parts of the United States, and the idea really took off. And anybody who's had chili can kind of understand, because it is really good. So what we need for ours is chili powder. Well, what we need for all of them is chili powder. The basis of any good chili, in my opinion, is the chili powder. If you mess up on the chili powder, you might as well not be making chili. Come on. So for this, we're going to be using a little bit of cayenne, just a little bit of cayenne, smoked paprika, and smoked paprika is a lot like regular paprika, only it's because of the roasting process, it has a little bit of a deeper flavor. You can use regular paprika if you have it, that's fine. Oregano, dried oregano, a little bit of sage, although if you want, you can put the sage in with the chili and not with the chili powder. We're also going to have coriander, which is an unusual spice that is similar to ginger. It's a little bit fibrous and it's a little bit citrusy. It's very interesting. We're also going to be using cumin and a little bit of cocoa powder. That kind of really sets it apart. And then for the rest of the stew, which it is a stew, we're going to have about 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of hamburger. You don't want to go crazy on the hamburger because it'll put the burger out of balance with the kidney beans, which is there. A little bit of beef broth, 2 cans of crushed tomatoes, and a small can of tomato paste. We're also going to use a yellow onion for this. Right now I have a Spanish onion because I couldn't find a yellow onion, but it's pretty close. You can also use a white onion. I wouldn't use a sweet onion or a red onion, mostly because sweet onions won't have enough flavor and red onions will have too much, and they tend to just take over everything you put them in. And also a few garlic cloves, salt and pepper to taste, and something really interesting, and you can leave this out if you want, but something called Aleppo pepper. Now, this is something kind of interesting that my physical therapist told me about a few weeks ago. She saw it on a YouTube show, and she told me about it because she had bought some and tried it and said it was good, so I got excited, and I got some and tried it, and now it's back on YouTube. Full circle. This is the world we live in. So anyway, this is a type of red pepper that is grown in Syria and Turkey. Now, obviously, the name Aleppo pepper suggests the Syrian capital of Aleppo. I might be pronouncing that wrong. I'm sorry if I am. Now, unfortunately, because of the Syrian civil war that's been going on the past few years, a lot of production has moved over the border into Turkey. But because of the horrible earthquake last month, as of when I'm filming this, it was about a month ago, there were about 500,000 casualties between both countries, and it was awful. So I don't know how easily this is going to be something, that is going to be able to be found in this country. You can use crushed red pepper if you want. You can eliminate it altogether. You can put in fresh jalapenos. But this is something really, really spectacular that I don't think a lot of people know about. I bought this off of Amazon. It was like $6, and it is an unusually oily pepper. This is just dried, but it's a little bit oily, and it has this really wonderful bouquet to it. It's like fruity, citrusy. People have described it as tasting like raisins. It's not extremely hot, but it has enough of a kick. But yeah, it's a really wonderful thing that Syria has given the world and Turkey have given the world. And I know right now Syria and Turkey are hurting a lot. A lot of people have died. A lot of people have lost everything that they've owned, including family members that are not replaceable. So to if you're going to be using such a wonderful thing that they've given us, I wanted to put a link in the description of the video for a list of charities helping with the Syria earthquake relief, if you want to give to them. I would appreciate it, and I'm sure that they would very much appreciate it. So thank you for that. Also to get back to the episode, we're also going to be making cornbread, because I know a lot of people like to eat cornbread with chili. I certainly do. I enjoy it. But my cornbread is, I put honey in it on the top, so it's kind of dessert cornbread. I don't know. I know it's weird. I'm from Pennsylvania. I know people from the South, they're probably like, oh my God, what are you doing? But it is tasty. It's like a cornbread mullet. It's dessert up top and dinner bread on the bottom. Anyway, okay. So this is actually just a recipe I got from the Quaker Oats cornmeal box. It is the best recipe. It really is. It's fantastic. I can't do any better than it. I've made a couple of modifications on the type of milk and the amount of salt, but in essence, it is the Quaker cornmeal recipe, and it is fantastic. So we're, lots of love to Quaker for that. So that is flour, cornmeal, sugar, baking powder, salt, milk, vegetable oil, and an egg. And we're going to try to fit in cooking that in between our chili. So we're going to get started. So before we do anything else, we're going to heat up about a quarter of a cup of olive oil. I know it seems like a little bit much, but we've got a lot of stuff going in there, so it'll be fine. So what we want to do is turn it on to medium-high and let it sit for a little bit. Give it a few minutes to heat up and thin out. And as you can see, I've got my 3 to 5 cloves of garlic and about a half of a cup of a yellow, or Spanish in this case, onion. You want to make sure they're coarsely chopped. We don't want them too tiny because they're going to be stewing for a little bit, so we want to make sure they don't shrivel up and get nasty. And now we can work on our chili powder. This is the fun part. So we're going to start with our cayenne. You got to be very careful with this. It packs a punch and it gets everywhere. So don't sneeze. So we're going to do about an eighth of a teaspoon. And when you handle this stuff, make sure you don't, All right. Then we're going to move to our smoked paprika. Do 2 tablespoons of that. And now it probably seems weird that I'm doing this in a small food processor, but we have the sage and we have the oregano, and like I said, the coriander is a little bit fibrous. So what we want to do is just chop all them up as much as we can. Really mix them up well. All right, and then a tablespoon of cumin. One. Tablespoon of our dried oregano. You can buy this, you can dry it. Like the sage, as you can see, I ran out of bought sage, powdered sage. So we're just using dried sage. And I know it's not going to be exact, but That's going to be about a half a tablespoon. Okay. And then a tablespoon of coriander. And about, I'd say about a quarter of a teaspoon of cocoa. And yes, I'm using Hershey's. Anyway, alright, we can move that out of the way. Move these out of the way. And go ahead and process that real quick. Now, this is a $5 Hamilton, oh no, Proctor Silex food processor that I bought like 20 years ago when I moved here. So, as you can see, it's pretty beaten up. But it's pretty tough. What we're going to do just to make sure that, oops, I unplugged it. Just to make sure that our herbs are nice and chopped and everything is going to be mixed. Okay, now with the cayenne in there, when you open it, just make sure your face is not nearby. It'll hurt. Now that's perfect. Okay, that's ready to go in. And let's check on our oil now. It's doing good. Nice and heated up. Okay. So I'm going to switch cameras so we can see a down view. So give me 1 second. Okay, now our oil, as you can see, is nicely thinned out. It's nice and heated up. It's pretty warm in there. So we are going to take our half cup of yellow or Spanish onions and our 3 to 5 cloves of garlic. Go ahead and toss those in. It's going to sound like it's up too high, but it's not. We're just going to give them a quick cook. Make sure you keep them spinning around, or moving around rather. It's hot oil, don't spin it. Okay. Now these are going to cook down a little bit, get a little bit translucent. And we're going to go ahead and turn the heat down and add in a few more ingredients. And let that sit for a minute. Alright. And it smells amazing. So we're going to give that a nice mix. We're going to leave that to cook down for about 20 minutes on medium-high heat. We just want to cook it until the hamburger browns a little bit. Just going to stick a lid on, and we're going to let that go. And one more note before I leave and come back when it's ready to go. We're working with canned kidney beans. So as you can see, I uncanned my kidney beans and I rinsed them out and in a colander because there's a lot of random kidney bean sludge in the can. I don't know what it is. I don't want to know what it is. So I went ahead and washed them out. Now we're working with dark red kidney beans, as you can see. Because of all the spices, you know, we need something that can hold its own. And so what I did, just dump it in a colander, give it a rinse under cold water, and let it dry. As you can see, I have not let mine dry enough because I'm getting water all over the place. Just so we, you know, before we get started with anything else. And we can set those up by and let our meat finish browning, and we'll see it in a little bit, about 20 minutes. Okay, it's been about 15 or 20 minutes of our hamburger meat stewing. So we're going to go ahead and take our lid off and take a look. looks pretty good. Now, as you can see, there's still a good bit of liquid in here. We weren't trying to cook off the liquid. We were just stewing down the meat with the spices. And it's probably better that there is still some liquid in there. And yeah, our meat is looking very nice. Okay. Now, all we need to do is add our dark red kidney beans that we've given a rinse to. There we go. Those are 2 15-ounce cans, about standard soup can size. Okay, and now we have 2 28-ounce cans of crushed tomatoes, these big buggers here. Now, if you ever make sauce in the winter when you can't get fresh tomatoes, which, you know, it's Pennsylvania, it happens around here a lot. This is also what I use for my sauce, so we might make that again. Although technically it's spring now, so we might wait until, oops. Okay, do not add canned to soup, that is not in the recipe. But anyway, we might make sauce out of canned tomatoes one of these days next year. Okay, 2 cans. Okay, and we're going to use 1 teeny tiny can of tomato paste. Now, as I understand it, the more traditional way of making the Texas version of chili con carne, and I know, I'm sure people in the comment section will correct me on this, but from my research, it seems like it's slow stewing of beef short ribs instead of hamburger. So we may do another episode this summer where we break out the slow cooker and make a little bit more of a Texas version, a Texas appropriate version, with some tomatoes from the garden. So that'll be fun. Okay. Excellent. Now what we want to do, after we give this a nice mix up, that looks good already. Okay, we want to bump the heat up to high and bring it to a bit of a boil, and then we're going to drop it immediately and bring it down to a simmer, which is a slow, low cook that still will get a little bit of the liquid out. So this is a stage where we want to cook some of the liquid out, some of the liquid, the water from the tomatoes and some of the water from the beef broth, to concentrate the flavor down a little bit. It should take a few minutes to heat up, and in that time I'm just going to keep stirring. Make sure you scrape the bottom. You don't want anything sticking or burning. Okay. I'll just give that a couple minutes. Okay, so what we want to do is let this cook on low, on simmer, a little bit for about 20 to 30 minutes with the lid on to make sure everything cooks down together, and then we're going to take the lid off and we're going to simmer it again and get some of the liquid out of there. And cook it down into a nice thick stew. Okay, now as you can hear, hopefully we've got bubbling going on, and hopefully you can also see this, we've got some bubbling going on in the corners. So it's starting to boil here, so it's starting to get hot enough. So we'll let that keep going until we get some more bubbles coming up here, and then when we dunk the heat down, you'll still see some small bubbles coming out. That's the simmering process. You see some bubbles coming out here. It's starting to boil. That looks pretty good. Now we're going to bump it down and just let it simmer. Stick the lid on and let that go for, like I said, about a half an hour. And in the meantime, well, you want to make sure that you keep stirring it, of course. That's important. Every now and then, just double check on it, give it a stir, scrape the bottom, just make sure it's you keep an eye on it. And in the meantime, for that 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to start on our cornbread. Okay, we are back to work on our cornbread. Now, before we get started, you want to go ahead and preheat your oven to 400, and we're going to butter a small dessert bread pan. Now, this is not the size of a regular bread loaf, but rather just something that you would make like banana bread or something in. So we're going to take a stick of butter, and just like we did in the first episode, spread it all over every surface so we can get it on. Back in the fridge, and then we're going to take our hands and make sure that we give it a nice even coating. And as you can see on the bottom, there are ridges here, so we want to make sure those are heavily buttered so nothing sticks in them. And pay special attention to the corners and the edges. Make sure we get it spread all around. Okay, we can set that aside for now and wipe the butter off of our hands. Okay. Now, last week we talked about wet ingredients and dry ingredients. And last week we took our wet ingredients and put our dry ingredients into it. Now, this week we're doing the opposite. We're going to take our dry ingredients and then add our wet ingredients. And instead of mixing everything well like we did last time, we're only going to give it a very coarse mixing, just until everything is mixed together and the dry ingredients are all wet, basically. We don't want to overmix this because it can affect the texture significantly. So we're going to go ahead and start with our 1 cup and a quarter of flour, okay, and 3/4 of a cup of cornmeal. And we're going to talk about cornmeal some more when we start making pizza, so stay tuned for that. Okay. And we have 2 teaspoons, of baking powder that can go in, and about I don't know, about a 1/4 cup of salt. I'm sorry, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Oh my God! And for this recipe, we're going to put our sugar in our dry ingredients instead of our wet. So when you're baking, granulated sugar is the and sometimes why of the wet and dry ingredients. You know how sometimes when in elementary school you learn that the vowels sometimes include y and sometimes they don't. Well, sugar is an opportunist, so it will go in whichever goes in first, generally. So we're going to go ahead and put in a 1/4 cup of sugar in with our dry ingredients and give that a mix. Make sure everything is combined nicely. Now we have a 1/4 cup of milk. Another original recipe called for skim milk, but I don't buy skim milk because it's an abomination to milk. So this is 2% milk. You can use whole milk. Actually, I've cooked this with whole milk and it tastes really good. So we're going to go ahead and pour that in. Now, like last time, you can pour in batches if you want, but you don't have to. And we've got a 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, or canola oil, or whatever flavorless oil that you want to put in. This is canola oil, just because I tend to keep it on hand. Give that a bit of a mix. And then toss in 1 egg. This is a jumbo egg. You can use 2 small eggs. You can use a couple of egg whites if you want to make it a little bit healthier. It's up to you, just as long as you've got enough liquid and it's not too dry. Now, as I said before, we want to make sure we get everything mixed up, but stop there on the mixing. We do not want to overmix this. There we go. That was very quick and painless. Alright, and it's okay if it's a little chunky. It's better that way, actually. That's part of what makes cornbread so good, is the texture. So, well, I'm going to flip this around. We're going to just pour this in. And you can try to get it, you know, put in evenly, but the weight of the batter will kind of push it down into the corners. You can give it a hand if you want, but you have to be very careful that you don't scrape any of the edges or the bottom where the butter is, because it'll stick. Okay. There we go. Up evenly and not touch the sides or the bottom. Okay, perfect. Alright, now here comes the fun part. So we're going to put this in at 400 and let it cook for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to take it out, and in this cup I have, well, we have our trusty basting brush that we use way more than I thought we were going to on the show. But and in a small mug, I have about a tablespoon of honey with just a little splash of water. We're going to put that in the microwave for about 30 seconds. Well, actually, no, that's a little bit too long. Maybe about 10-15 seconds, just to heat the honey up enough that you can kind of mix it up. And when this has cooked about 5 minutes, it should have a slightly harder top on it. So we're going to go ahead and actually brush some of the honey on top of the cornbread and let it cook for about another 10 minutes. And then do another dose, another layer, another, I don't know how you would use that. We're going to do it again. There you go. And then let it cook, and it'll have a nice sweet top on it. And it's actually really delicious. So we're going to go ahead and put that in, remember, for about 5 minutes. Okay. And we've been, okay, so it's been about 5 minutes. The first 5 minutes of the cornbread is over, but before we grab it out, we want to make sure we're still keeping an eye on our chili over here. It's looking really good. Make sure you give it a stir every now and then. Put the lid back on, and we can grab our cornbread out right now. Now it's got a bit of a hard crust on the top. It's paper thin though. Oh, that's hot. Too long in the microwave. Alright, so you want to make sure that when you're putting this on, you're not going too heavy with it. So you don't want to break through that paper thin layer on top. Okay. You can hear the bubbling in the background. That's a good sign. That means it's, well, actually it might be up a little bit too high. Let's turn that down a little bit. It's aggressively bubbling. So, yeah, if you do scuff up the surface of that, that's fine. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and put it back in for about 10 minutes. And then put some more honey on. So we'll see that. Okay, well, it's been about 10 minutes, and hopefully it's still been stirring, stirring your chili here. Let's just double check. All right, that's simmering very nicely. Okay, so that's been simmering for about 20 minutes. Whoa. It's been simmering for about 20 minutes. So we want to give it maybe another 10 minutes, and then we're going to turn up the heat a little bit, take the lid off, and cook some of the water out. But for now, we're going to go with our second honeying. Is that a word? Honeying? I don't know. But look how lovely our cornbread is getting. Very nice. Okay, let's cool it down. I don't want to burn myself again. Okay. Okay. If there's anything left, go ahead and just pour it on. Okay. We can set that aside and put this in for another probably 15 or 20 minutes. And we're going to talk about checking the doneness for a second before we do that. So all you have to do is grab a little butter knife and stick it in the center. If you pull it out, if there's stuff on it, it needs to go back in. If it's clean, then you can pull it out and it's ready to eat. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth in about 20 minutes. Actually, I'm going to come back in about 10 minutes. And we're going to take the top off of this, and then 10 minutes after that, we're going to check on our cornbread. So we'll see you in about 10 minutes for that, not this. See you then. Okay, so it's been about a good half an hour for this. So let's take a look at it. Okay, everything should be cooked down. The flavors should be nice and cooked down together. So what we're going to do, after we give it a nice little stir here. So you can see there's still a good bit of liquid on the top. So what we're going to do is cook it uncovered at about medium to high heat for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe, depending on how long it takes to get all the extra water out, and then we should be good to go. So we'll see you in about, 10 minutes for the cornbread to give that a check. Well, the timer on our cornbread has sounded, so we're going to go grab it out and see how it's looking. And that is really lovely. And it feels done. Now we're going to try our knife test. Remember, insert it in, try to get as close to the middle as you can. And that means middle lengthwise as well as widthwise. And that looks like a very clean knife. So it looks like it's cooked the whole way through. So we're going to just let this sit and cool a little bit in our toaster oven here, our air fryer oven. I don't really know exactly which name it is, but you know what I mean. So we're going to let that cool a little bit, and we still have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes left on our chili. As you can hear it, it's bubbling very nicely. That's exactly what we want. That water coming up to the surface and cooking out. And you want to make sure that, definitely during this time, you want to make sure you stir it and give the bottom a good scrape, because this is the time when stuff will stick to it. Okay. I guess that would be maybe another 10 minutes or so. So we're going to let that go, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes and see how it looks. Alright, well, I think it's been about long enough. Most of the water has drained out, and our chili has reduced, I'd say about a third from where it was. So we're going to go ahead and turn the heat off, and as you can see, I've made a bit of a mess around here. But, you know, that happens when you're cooking tomato products at a high temperature. It comes with the territory. Okay, that looks very good. So, let's see here. Looks really good. Okay. And as you can see, I've taken our cornbread out of our pan. It was pretty easy. I just took the same bread knife, gave it a little cut around the edges, and it popped out because we buttered the pan really well. So we didn't have to worry about it sticking. So all you have to do is take a bread knife. As you can see, the serrations on it. slice it up. There you go. Now you are ready for dinner. And that looks pretty good. Although I did miss lunch. So I'm really hungry right now. So, there you go. Nothing to it, right? Chili is pretty easy and it's very good. Actually, I made chili for the first time yesterday when I was making my test batch, believe it or not, and I was really impressed. I mean, I did about a week of research of different recipes, different techniques and stuff, and I kind of compiled all that into what I thought was going to work pretty well, and you know what? It actually did. I had it for dinner last night, and it was really delicious. And like I said, the cornbread is literally just off of the back of the cornbread, the cornmeal container. With a couple of modifications, it's already the perfect recipe. I don't need to change it. So, any more than I already did. So remember, we were talking about our Aleppo peppers at the beginning and Syrian earthquake relief, and just so nobody forgets, I'm going to have a CNN compiled um, a list of really good charity organizations, relief organizations. So I'm going to be sharing that link down in the description of the video. So if you could share it, if you could give, I would really appreciate it, and so would everybody who was affected by the terrible earthquakes in Syria. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Kitchen Witchin', coming to you from the Ugliest Kitchen in America. And happy cooking, and I'll see you next time.